This is the Co-op and Condo Insider, the podcast dedicated to New York's cooperative and condominium communities. This is your trusted source for the latest insights, strategies, and stories shaping the world of shared housing. You will hear from the people who are leaders in this community, information and insights you will not hear anywhere else. If you want to stay ahead of the curve, you're in the right place. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the host or any affiliated individuals or organizations.
Hello and welcome to the Co-op and Condo Insider, where we explore the real-world issues facing co-op and condo communities across New York City, with insight, expertise, and a healthy dose of straight talk. I'm your host, Jeffrey Maisel. I'm a co-op attorney and legal advisor to the President's Co-op and Condo Council. I'm thrilled to be joined by my co-host, Richard Solomon, a seasoned voice in public radio for over 20 years. Richard has taken his listeners around the world to meet experts, newsmakers, and the people making a real difference in our lives. Richard, great to have you on the mic with us today.
Greetings, everyone.
And we have a very interesting and exciting guest and an old friend of ours, at least an old friend of mine, and a new friend of Richard's and his neighbor, we just found out, Mark Weprin. Mark, we're going to talk about your incredible family legacy, your incredible public service in both housing, and of course, we're going to talk about co-op issues because you do have a long history of dealing with co-op issues. And I think a lot of the things you worked on many years ago are still relevant today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. It's great to be here, Richard. Always a pleasure now to talk to you as well.
A new friend.
Yes.
So one of my proudest moments is when I went to the senior center that my father attended, and there was a TV named in his honor. But Mark, your father has a whole street named after him. So why don't you just tell us about the legacy of your father, Saul Weprin?
Well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. Yeah, my dad, Saul Weprin, grew up in Brooklyn, but he was a World War II veteran, and he moved to Queens to live in one of the newly built veterans co-ops that was being set up in Queens. And there were a lot of them, obviously, in Queens. They were in Hilltop Village, which is on Francis Lewis Boulevard and Hillside Avenue. I know you're familiar with it, not far from Gabby's Pizza. They moved there when had my eldest brother was born there, and my second brother, David Weprin, who many of you know, who also is in politics, were both born there. Once my mother got pregnant with me, they ended up moving into a house, but that's where he got his start. And they lived there for about 8 years. And my father ended up being co-op president at Hilltop. One of the, I know they break them up to like 4 sections, but he was one of those sections, the one that included the Dover, whichever number that was. And he was co-op president, and it got him involved in politics because the local district leader or the local county leader was looking for a new district leader for the Democratic Party. And because he was the president of a co-op and knew a lot of people, they recruited my father to get involved in politics. In 1960, he became a district leader and sort of got him started on politics.
Very interesting. And then what was the first office he ran for?
Well, you had to run for Democratic district leader. It isn't a big office, but it's a local political office. You actually have to run for that. And he was that for about 10 years when the current assemblyman at the time, now you're testing my memory on who it was. Lou Wallach, I think his name was leaving, becoming a judge or leaving, and they were looking for someone to run. My dad was one of the district leaders. They get to pick who the person was, and there was a big debate between 2 different camps. Again, this is before my time to remember exactly, and the county couldn't decide on a candidate, and they came up with a compromise, and that was having my father run. And in 1971, in a special election, he ran for the assembly and was elected, and that started his elected office. Yeah.
What was his job, and what did he do for a living?
Well, he was an attorney. He was an attorney. He did mostly tax cert work, actually. I don't know if he worked on a lot of co-ops, although I think later on he did. But he did mostly tax cert work. He worked for the state liquor authority at one time. He was general counsel there, but then ended up having his own private practice. And then he worked in some small firms along the way off Jamaica Avenue under the L at the time. He had an office, and we lived on 188th Street when we bought a house. not far from where Richard lives, although we don't want people to know where you live, Richard, so I won't tell you. Yeah.
All right. So as we were just speaking before, you mentioned he was Speaker of the Assembly for a couple of years at the end of his career. And then you, and I was not aware of this, you ran for his seat when he retired. So how was watching his career, how did it influence your decision to run for office?
Right. So it's a weird dynamic because people a lot of time give us a hard time about, going into politics. They call you Nepo babies these days, and you get criticized sometimes for coming from a family that's in this business. But honestly, it's not that different than, people who go be firefighters who I know, whose father was a firefighter, whose grandfather was a firefighter, or a doctor I know. Who went into became a doctor because his father was. We grew up in a weird family, no question. Politics was a big part of our lives. Our dad would include us in a lot of activities. So on the weekends, he often had to go to churches to speak, or to Democratic clubs, or to local, events that were going on. And very often, in order to spend time with his family, he'd bring us with him. And my dad, those who knew him, he was a very humble guy. He really was in government for the right reasons. He wasn't out there to try to make money. Unfortunately, he didn't make enough that much money, but he did it because he thought it was the right thing to do, and he cared about people, and he was a good man. So when you have that as your example, it does make it appealing. And when you came to our house for dinner, any weekend or any time, the talk was often about politics. Most families in the summer, for instance, would go on vacation somewhere, would get in the car and travel, or fly somewhere, or go away. We would work on a political campaign. In 1977 was a very famous one when I was a young man, little boy, and our whole family worked on the Mario Cuomo for mayor campaign. Now, he ended up coming in second and not winning, but that's what we did for the summer. And it's kind of a strange way to live, but we all spent time together when we worked in campaign and grew up with it. So that's what I believe, was the inspiration, him wanting it. My dad ended up becoming speaker, and at one point he was not. He ended up passing away in office, and he was sick. We didn't know how sick. He, I think, knew, and we did not. He said, "Oh, Mark, would you be interested in running for my seat if something didn't happen?" And I was like, "Dad, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. I don't want to talk about it." Turned out, like 2 weeks later, he had a stroke, and it was the last time I got to communicate with him. So my last conversation with him was that I would consider running for the seat. Wasn't something I wanted to do initially. I wasn't planning on it, but I figured I'll do it for a couple of years, and then we'll see. Sure enough, I spent 15 years in Albany, and as a state assembly member, and that was a while ago, and then ended up running for the city council and doing other things after that.
So what years were you in the assembly, and what years were you in the council?
Right. So I was elected in 1994 to the assembly in a special election in the spring. And I was there for 15 years. In 2009, I ran for the city council, the New York City Council, because the current city councilman, who at that point became my brother, was leaving. And I had just had my third child. My daughter was just born, and I was like, I don't want to be away again and I missed my son's first steps. I used to have a hard time making school plays or Little League games. When I was up in Albany. So I said, let me, this is, and a lot of the issues I was working on were issues that were more closer to home. There were a lot about schools. I had 3 kids in the New York City public schools. So I was very active in those issues. And those New York City schools, even though are run by the mayor, we ended up passing mayoral control. I was in the assembly, something I worked very hard on. And working on those issues that really mattered at home. So for me, it seemed like a logical step to go to the city council, where I not only won't have to travel to Albany, but got to work on issues that were near and dear to our local community.
So I don't know how many people have served in both houses, but it can't be that many. How would you compare the two experiences? And which one did you like better? Or they were just different?
No, they are different. It's funny. The state assembly and the city council. The city, so the districts are similar. The city council is slightly bigger, but the New York City gets a lot more attention than the state does. If you're a rank and file state assembly member, nobody pays any attention to you outside of your district. unless you commit a crime or something. Yeah. Otherwise, no one knows who you are. And thank God that never happened. So you don't get a lot of attention. For some reason, the city council, and the reason is there's a press corps in Albany. They call it the LCA room, LCA, Legislative Correspondence Association. And then there's a press room in New York City in City Hall called Room 9, because it's Room 9 in the City Hall. And those reporters in Room 9 have to do a story every day. And when they do a story on something the city council does, it could make the front page. Even something you might say at a hearing could make the front page. In Albany, even if you work for the New York Times, you write a story about Albany, it's on page, B16, it's never a big story somehow, unless the governor does something or the speaker potentially does something. But rank and file legislators don't get a lot of attention. The difference as far as being a legislator, it's kind of the difference between going away to college. I know you went to Binghamton, so it's like going away to Binghamton as opposed to going to Queens College. When you're in the city council, it's like you're going to commuter school, because and the reason that the only effect that has on the public and on the legislator is you don't have the same bonds. Like in Albany, you really become friends with people because you're spending nights there. You eat meals together. You sit around and wait a lot. Waiting for bills to be printed, for issues to be negotiated. You're in meetings all the time. So it's almost like going away somewhere and living with them, as opposed to city council, where you went in, you went to your office, you saw people, but then you went home, and you went home at night. You had meetings to go to, and expected you to. You didn't go out to dinner with a lot of colleagues. Occasionally, we would do it. In the city council, we tried to have a dinner where we had everyone get together on a Saturday night once, and we go in different people's districts. I had one at the Queens County Farm, actually, where they have a great little tavern night there every year. They do a couple of nights where they make it almost like the 1700s, and they use the hearth and the wood burning stove, fireplace to cook everything, and they use the vegetables from the farm and don't use any electricity except for candlelight. It's a beautiful experience. Well, we brought a bunch of council members there, and it was a lot of fun.
So let's pivot a little bit. We'll talk about. I think we met each other. I think you were still in the assembly, and then of course we worked closely when you were in the New York City Council. And you were a big advocate for co-op and condo homeowners. Mm-hmm. Just describe to our listeners what you feel is the importance of co-op home ownership and why it's a vital component to the New York City's housing ecosystem.
As I mentioned about my parents coming here after World War II, there were a lot of co-ops that were veteran co-ops. Not only those, but a lot of them. So my old assembly district had I had a lot of co-ops in the district, each with thousands of units. So you're talking about a very large portion of my district involved co-ops and condos, mostly co-ops. North Shore Towers ended up in my council district. That was there. Windsor Park and Windsor Oaks and Glen Oaks and Deepdale and a lot of the, and so many more. Of course, Hilltop Village. And other places. So a big part of my district were these co-ops. And the thing is, the average person in New York City or New York State, co-ops. So those are those fancy ones that won't let Madonna, live there, or they have these co-op boards and they cost millions of dollars to buy co-op. But as you know, that's not the co-ops I'm talking about. Our local co-ops are middle-class homeowners who, they're beautiful. Some of them are beautiful, and the neighborhoods are gorgeous, and the schools are great. But they don't cost $1 million. Maybe they do now. I don't even know what the prices are.
No, they don't.
But not quite there. But you're talking about a middle class salary, a doctor. A police officer or a teacher buying a co-op, and it's a great thing. We've often advocated that it's so much better when someone owns a piece of property, owns something, even if it's shares of a co-op, because it's more their neighborhood. They're not living for 2 years and leaving. They tend to buy it early on. A lot of people use it as startup homes, but you own a little piece of the world almost. I understand you're only shares of the co-op, but you're now part of that co-op, and it's everybody working together. And so it was an important issue for me, and it's one of the reasons. One of the first bills I got involved with, and that was important to co-ops, was the tax credit, the real property tax credit that co-ops got, because it really was unfair if you think about it. that a lot homeowners, and I mean, I'm glad I actually am a homeowner myself now. We get assessed at a 20% rate, much less property taxes than you would do if you assessed at 100% of the value. And co-ops were getting killed on real property taxes because they have this arcane system of figuring out how much a co-op's property taxes are based on if it was a rental unit, what would it be? As opposed to possibly, figuring out a solution that is fairer, because co-ops were getting taxed higher than so many other apartments, and while Manhattan co-ops weren't getting taxed nearly as much percentage-wise as these Queens middle-class homeowners that we want to keep living in the neighborhood.
And by the way, that is still an issue, but it's one. There's so many issues now that are more urgent, unfortunately, or more present, that the tax equity issues kind of have been taking a backseat the last couple of years. So basically,
even the dogs are upset about this, I've heard. So
yeah.
So you can hear my dog barking in the background.
Oh, I didn't hear that. No. What kind of dog? Well, I got you.
He is a blue heeler or cattle dog and a beagle mix. We got him at North Shore Animal League about 7 years ago. Yeah.
Tell him we say hello. So why is there, and again, I think we've had this conversation. I understand in Albany, a lot of electeds don't really deal with co-ops, but even in New York City, there seems to be a disconnect between some elected officials and the understanding this value of, we always called it the last bastion of affordable housing. When they talk about affordable housing, they never talk about like the co-ops in your district where you can buy a home for $300,000 and be first-time home buyers. Where is that disconnect based on what you saw when you were there and what you observe now?
Well, a big deal. I mean, if everyone had the same district I had, everybody would be talking about it and understand that. But these co-ops that we have are not common throughout the city. They're common in big parts of the city, but not everyone has them. The Manhattan co-ops are not the same. Let's face it, they are not. And there's a wide swaths of Brooklyn and even parts of Queens that don't have them either. But there are a lot of them. It's one of the reasons when I went to the city council that we established something, a co-op and condo task force, which was a group of legislators who represented a large amount of co-ops. Now, we included the Manhattan people, and because they were important voices, but a lot of the issues that really concern me were ones that don't concern the Manhattan co-ops as much as they do ours. Because these are where a lot of our co-ops are operating on a shoestring. Like they have a budget, and they're not there to they're not making money. Obviously, you want to have enough money in reserves to be able to fix things. But you're trying to run almost like a not-for-profit co-op where you're not looking to make money. You're trying to just put it back into the co-op and make it a great place to live. And I know that's true about a lot of ours. And they get killed. They get killed on a lot of these things where people don't think of us. So you're right. That is the problem, where not everyone has the same empathy for these type of co-ops in particular than we do. But that's one of the things we're doing by talking about the issue often. When I was in the council, we had a big fight over the tax assessments and how they do assessments. And a good part of that was the fact that we had this group of co-op legislators, certainly all the ones around here, the ones in what now is Vicky Palladino's district, and Linda Lee, who is one of my successors, and then down south. And those parts of that area have a lot of them in Forest Hills and other places. And we had a lot of people. We had about 20 members of that co-op and condo caucus, and it made for a much more effective advocacy for co-ops.
So, and just in full disclosure, having run into you a few weeks ago, you inspired me about the caucus, and we are now working with several electeds to get something like a co-op and condo caucus and its missions and goals. And
like I said, it's an informal group, but an effective group in that we'd have regular meetings, we discuss issues. If you can remember, we had a big fight over the taxation at the time, and that was a big issue. We had a public hearing that we ran on that. And it's a great way to call attention to issues that are unique. And there are a lot of issues that are unique to co-ops and condos. I know currently there are a lot of issues with laws that have wide support in theory, but in practice, they aren't always great for everybody, like Local 97, which, I come out, I do work in renewable energy too. So I'm all for trying to decarbonize the world and to save the planet, but you have to do it rationally where you're not punishing, middle class homeowners, and there needs to be some leeway here.
So that's good transition. If you saw the numbers in terms of penalties or retrofit costs to comply with Local 197 or pay the penalties, it's astonishing. I mean, it's generational projects that are being forced upon co-ops that don't have the money, and quite frankly, the technology I don't think is settled in terms of the best way to do it, and the renewable infrastructure is not quite there yet in terms of the electric grid and all that. So,
no question. About 20 years ago, to add to this, approximately 20 years ago, there was a big push to try to change the people who had oil heat, who were doing fuel, saying you can't use number 6, you have to use number 4, then you had to use number 2. They were trying to do ones that gave less emissions, which was a good thing. And a lot of co-ops did what they thought was the good thing to do, which is, you know what, I'm just going to get rid of oil and I'm going to switch to gas heat, which they're not regulating at the moment. And then sure enough, some co-ops spent millions of dollars to transfer to gas heat. And now they're being told you can't have gas heat. Otherwise we're going to fine you and you're going to have penalties, going forward. So that really is an unfair burden. And again, these are people who are living on a shoestring. I mean, not that personally, the families, but the co-ops are not, money-making ventures. They're trying to operate. And when you have a huge cost that's brought into to the buildings, or buildings, it's shared, it's cooperative. That's the whole point of the name. Everyone has to pay for it. So you're going to get hit on your maintenance, so you're going to get hit with a separate charge saying we had to upgrade the thing. And these fines are the same if you go forward. So a lot of people I know, the co-op, I want to thank you and the co-op presidents who have been advocating very strong to say, hey, you got to give us a break here. I mean, we are not, we're not wealthy communities. We live in New York City. We love to live in New York City. We could move to Long Island if we wanted to. We could move somewhere else where we're not getting penalized like this. There needs to be something fair. And it's hard because I do think there's overwhelming support in the New York City Council for trying to transition away from fossil fuels. It's true. But as you mentioned, it sounds great in theory, but, you need to get the clean energy. There's a lot of them in upstate New York, a lot of wind and solar farms, but there's no transmission that's going to bring that wind and solar down to New York City. There's been talk about it, and there have been some projects that have been held up.
So again, these unfunded mandates again are very similar to when you were in office, except Local 197 has brought it to a level where an individual unit owner could be on the hook for $30,000 to $50,000 for a technology that might not be the best technology to heat their apartment. And the city council, I call it's a tale of two cities. As you said, the co-op council members with co-ops and condos understand this, and the other council members are pedal to the metal enforcement of Local 97, and their constituents are not stakeholders.
Yeah, that is the key factor, Jeff, because the problem is that so many we're talking about, while we have what I think is a very good case and a good argument, the type of people who live in our co-ops, who you want to have here in New York City, the amount of money they're being charged, it affects my old district more than most districts. And the problem is the districts that it doesn't affect, I'm really sorry to hear that, Mark, but what's in it for me? What's in it for my constituents? I'd love to help you guys out. But any breaks you give to us sometimes doesn't translate to anybody else. And unfortunately, council members, we're very parochial. I'm not going to lie. I was probably no different. I cared about my district, and I cared about things that affect. Look, there were times when I understood this is a bigger issue than my district, and we have to do that. But but my focus was on my district and the people who I represent, who elected me, and I have to be responsive to. And because of that, it's hard to get other people to focus on it. But when you have a mayor, we are a big piece of a lot of voters and a lot of people who the mayor represents. So I think that's where a lot of the focus needs to be on the mayor. I understand he's very pro local law 97. And we're not saying get rid of local law 97. We're just saying to amend parts of it. I assume I haven't been as involved in the issue lately, but to sort of help these people who are getting unfairly burdened. He's all about, people paying their fair share. We're not against that, but we don't like paying way more than our fair share.
Well, we like to say affordability for all.
Right.
I could draw a parallel.
That's certainly his mantra. Yeah. Sorry about that, Rich.
I could draw a parallel. The city council passed all these engine idling laws against trucks, and I represent a number of different fleets. And the law is so draconian and it's so applied unfairly. And the way the cases are adjudicated is that they're always against the truck owners. And I have clients with 300-400 tickets. And the people who bring the tickets are not DEP officers, they're civilians riding around in bicycles. By the way, generally breaking the law by riding electric bikes on sidewalks to advance a ticket at which they get a contingency fee based on. They don't have to identify themselves and they don't have to appear in court. So again, there's a disconnect between the impact on the trucking community who are providing services and goods and infrastructure work to the city and its residents and the city council. To parallel that back, the local 97, how do we in the co-op community try to bring a level of true awareness and fairness when there's a disconnect on the actual impact?
Well, look, you mentioned a different law. This is true about a lot of laws, a lot of things that are enforced in different ways and not on everybody and all that. Like Linda Lee, who as the district is my councilwoman, is I think really out there advocating for a lot of our middle class co-ops. But she can't do it alone, although she just got appointed to be finance chair, which is a very big role. It's probably the number 2 role in the city council. So that will help her. She's very well liked, which also helps. Relationships are important in legislative bodies. If people like you, you're more likely to be able to get your message across. So, it's a fight that I think can be won because I do think we're on the right side. But we have to figure out how to do it in a proper way where we don't gut the law that the mayor supports and a lot of the council supports, but at the same time create fairness. And to the mayor's credit, he's talked a lot. He talks only about affordability. That's his mantra. And he talks about including real property tax fairness. So I have a feeling the issue of co-op and condos assessments will come up again, because if you're going to touch that third rail of real property assessments, and it is a dangerous thing to get involved in, I have to say, because the problem is that if you pull from one, you got to make it up from another. And depending on how they redo it, and one of the things I know has been mentioned, I don't want to endorse this because I don't, know all the ramifications, but it would seem to me for assessing a co-op, you assess a house on what the market rate for that house is, what similar houses go for every property. So if you're talking about co-ops, it should be based on like what they sell for, or some system where you get assessed based on how much a co-op costs, as opposed to what it would cost if it was a rental building. And we have a comparable rental building, which we never have around here, and they end up using ones that are way higher than they should be.
So we'll transition here. Tell us about life after public office. What are you doing now, and what's good?
So when I left elected office, I went to work for former Governor Cuomo, and spent 2 years working for Governor Cuomo, which was an exciting time. The governor, for all his flaws, was to accomplish a great deal in office, and it was fun to work there and exciting. I have then since gone off on my own in the private sector. I worked for a law firm for a while, then went to one of the clients of the law firm, which was a renewable energy company. I mentioned renewable energy before. based in Chicago, wind and solar projects here in New York State. I was working for them. And just in September, just a couple of months ago, I started my own public affairs practice where I'm currently instead of an employee. And I'm slowly but surely trying to help out. You spend 30 years in government. One thing you do is you become a bit of an expert on how things get done and what legislators want to hear. I mean, and so, businesses come to me with, for consulting on strategy. How do we get this done through government? How do we have this done without government screwing us, like we're talking about now? Or how do we get legislators to support us? And I have unusual insight where I've served both in the city and state as both a legislator and working for an executive. So one thing I do is I can relate to whoever I'm talking to. And that's, I have a friend who used to say that politicians are from Mars, but we speak Martian. That was like a good line he would use. And so I sort of know what a legislator needs in order to deliver for their district. Sometimes a client will think you could just call someone and say, hey, do this. Doesn't work that way.
No. So this is the part of our show where we try to make it a little more fun, a little more interesting. Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, with great pleasure. So I see that you worked for the Ed Koch administration at one point. I had the honor of actually interviewing him on my radio show. The nicest guy. Could you tell? Did you interact with him? Because he was.
I was a very young man at the time. It was one of my first jobs out of college. But I grew to love the guy because he could be tough. He was really smart and really tough. And when you had a meeting with him, he would get right to the heart of the issue. Like he knew exactly where the weaknesses were to your argument and everything. So he was a character. And that was the people remember Ed Koch just because he was part of being mayor is being a showman and being a cheerleader for the city. It's one of the things that I think Zoran Mandani does very well. And we're going to see. I know a lot of people are concerned about his politics because they are very far to the left. He calls himself a democratic socialist, but he is a charming guy, and he's very social media driven and media like imaging. And even we have a snowstorm coming up as we're taping this. I saw him on a news conference today, and he was on top of things. So I'm hopeful he'll become a little bit like Ed Koch. But Ed Koch famously used to walk around anywhere he went. How am I doing? How am I doing? And people would say. So he was very New York. He was a real New Yorker. He became a national celebrity. We really haven't had someone like him since then. We've had good mayors. We've had bad mayors, depending on your point of view. None of the mayors since Ed Koch have been national figures as much as he was. I do think Zoran could become that because he is unusually comfortable in his own skin. So I've gotten to know Zoran a little bit. I know him. I know a lot of the people he's brought into government. Ali Najmi, who some of you in Queens know, used to work for me, and he's his lawyer and helped run his campaign. So I'm hopeful. Look, I'm a New York City resident. I'm not one of these people who is out there and, I want to attack him. He's wrong on this. And I don't agree with him on a lot of issues. But he's my mayor now, and I got to try to make sure, I hope he does as good a job as possible. I'm not going to root for him to fail. I know a lot of people who are. I just thought that's not my nature.
Well, you know what I miss? I miss when Ed Koch was the voice of the sanitation sweeping machines that said, hey, this is Ed Koch. Move your car.
Yeah. I remember, and Ed Koch, even after he was mayor, was still a big figure doing TV shows and national reviews. And he even had the Judge Judy type thing where he was the People's Court judge. I remember going to a Ranger game, and he even had videos where he goes, 2 minutes for tripping, and Koch on the board, on the scoreboard. Yeah, so he was a character, and people like that. I think New Yorkers like having someone they can relate to as mayor.
I guess so from on 188th Street, when you kind of drive up and down, you smile. Is there like a real sense of pride that your family has such a history in that area?
Well, thank you. So 188th Street was co-named for my father after he passed away. It's funny. It is weird to see. I think my kids, I'd wonder, like, why is our grandfather's name up there? But what's ironic is I think if my father was alive and they did that, he probably would never drive on that street. He'd be afraid. He wouldn't want to even see it. That's the type of guy he was. He was sort of a humble guy. But look, I love my father. A day doesn't go by where someone doesn't mention my father to me and how they worked with him. And it's a long time ago already, but there's still people around, and he touched a lot of lives. It's one of the reasons, we went into this business, is because we could see how you could really, the gratification of helping someone who had a problem with government and figuring out how to solve that problem. That's currently what I'm doing now, although now I'm doing it for a fee,
Do you think his sense of public service came from his military background in World War II?
Well, I think they call him the greatest generation, right? I think everyone had kind of that united feel about the country. We didn't have social media where there was all this dissent every 2 minutes. So, I mean, I'm sure that's a part of it, no question. I'm sure that was a little part of it. Everyone wanted to serve back in World War II. Like, people were lined up. It wasn't like what happened in Vietnam, and it wasn't what happened in other wars and other conflicts. It was one where the country was all united. We saw the reason for this war, and people were ready to serve and help our country and help our communities.
So we have to wrap up. This was a great conversation. Mark, you're welcome back anytime. I want to congratulate you because you are now officially a co-op and condo insider. So
excellent.
Congratulations.
I don't know if people
that.
can't see that you have a co-op and condo insider, a coffee mug.
We have co-op and condo. We have swag now, so you'll be getting one of those.
Do you have a gear store where people can go online and buy a coffee mug?
At the end of the tour, there's a gift shop.
I don't know how you're going to keep them in supply. They're going to be so popular.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for listening. And we'll see you on the next podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Co-op and Condo Insider. We hope you found today's conversation informative and insightful. Don't forget to subscribe. We're available on all major podcast platforms. Until next time, stay informed.